Greetings, fellow travelers. Welcome to the 22nd level of the RPG Cave. I'm one of your hosts, the level 99 human Archmage, Ryan Turford. I almost forgot what my class was, and I'm joined, as always, by the level 99 Elf Ranger, Mr. Garret Bland. Garret, how are you doing on this lovely, lovely Sunday today?
I'm doing very well. I'm doing good. I'm ready to talk the best handheld of all time, or the darling, I guess
One
you
of
could
the
say.
best. One of the best.
One of the best, PlayStation Vita.
I'm so excited to talk to you about this too, because I know that this is kind of, again, we talked about it before, but this is kind of like the antithesis for the idea of us talking about RPGs on the RPG Cave and coming up with this show was our love for the PlayStation Vita and how it's a great console for RPGs. And I will say, kind of before we kind of go into things with the Vita, I know you and I aren't like super experts on Vita in the sense that we haven't played every RPG on the console. No. But I'm excited to talk about kind of our favorite games on the PlayStation Vita, a console that you and I both love a whole lot on this show. But before we get into all that stuff, of course, we got to clear the dungeon of the pesky mobs. So, of course, if you like what you do, and you want to support the show, head on over to youtube.com/YouMeCapri if you want to see a video version of the show. Like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Also, you can subscribe to us on your podcast feed of choice, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We're on all the things, so check us out there. Last but not least, if you want early access to this and all of our shows, patreon.com/YouMeCapri is how you do that. Throw a little tip in the old tip jar and out comes content. And you can go check us out there as well. Also, while you guys are watching this episode on Saturday, normally this would be the place where I would say, hey, you should come hang out with us at Fan Expo, because we are actually doing a Yumi and Capri meetup in Toronto the weekend you're actually listening to this. But I think we're a little too late for this, because this will be out on Saturday. Unless you want to meet up with us on Sunday, in which case, if you definitely want to do that, reach out to me on Twitter at Ryan Turford. If you want to come hang out with us in Toronto, Sean Capri is going to be there. I'm going to be there. Matt Sowinski is going to be there. Many people from the community are going to be there, and we're gonna meet in person for the first time, except for Sean. Sean and I have met a couple times now, but everyone else, it's going to be a lot of fun. So there you go.
It seems really fun. I wish I can cross the border, but I don't think that's a good idea now.
No, I'm with you, because like Extra Life is coming up too, and I know that there's a big thing in Rome, New York for that, but I'm not going to be able to attend for the same reason, because crossing the border is iffy at the moment. So there you go. All right, let's read from the sacred texts, because it is time, Garret. Our top 10 Vita RPGs list. Let's go. I'm so excited to talk about this. So even though we've talked about kind of our favorite Vita RPG before, thanks to a question from Brendan Myers on the first couple episodes of the show, I wanted to do kind of like a bigger list, because I know the PlayStation Vita, again, is an important console to both of us. It's got some great RPGs on it, and some of which people know about, and some of which are, what I would consider maybe hidden gems, like games that people might have missed. So we wanted to be out here and do the public service, Garret, of telling people what RPGs they need to play and check out on the PlayStation Vita. So I'm ready to get into it. But before I throw to you with your first pick, Garret, I feel we need to get the first game out of the way first. The obvious one, and mainly I wanted to do this one first because we did a whole conversation about it when we had Brendan Myers' question what our favorite game on PlayStation Vita was. So we already talked about it, but we wanted to talk about it here as well, since you maybe missed the first couple episodes of this show. That's for Persona 4 Golden. I mean, it's we both said it at the time pretty unanimously, as that was like our favorite PlayStation Vita RPG of all time. Maybe that's changed with us revisiting it for this list. Who knows? But I would say it's probably definitively the best one. It's definitely the easiest one for new people to get into. Garret, what else is there really to say about Persona 4 Golden now?
I think, as you said, it's a good introduction to the Vita system itself. It's a very solid gameplay. It's Persona as the best it's ever been for even Persona 4. The music's great. The characters are awesome. Everything about it is really good. So I would highly, if you get a Vita, which you can probably get one off of eBay for like $150 or something like that used, you get this game. You can probably get it pretty cheap now. I'm not sure on the used market per se. I know they had a lot of sales with the PlayStation the PlayStation system, but I'm sure they don't do much Vita sales these days.
No,
so maybe try to go out there and get it physically if you want to play on it. But yeah, this is a great startup to our conversation.
Although I will say, physical copies are actually more expensive than buying it digitally at this point because the game is, they've gotten up there. So, the state of Vita collecting physically is not in a great place at the moment that we're recording this, where it's like most of the games are at least $60 US. So it's like it's going to be very hard to collect it. But at the same time, you can find it for cheap. Absolutely. Or worst case scenario, if you don't have a PlayStation Vita, it is on PC. So if it's on
PC,
if you've got Steam, check it out there as well.
And it looks freaking fabulous on PC. Yeah. It's like unlimited frame rates. You got the highest textures. So yeah, but that's probably a good way to go.
At the same time, like you don't get it portably in this little nice form factor. Like you gotta be like, that's one of the nice things about Persona 4.
It's a very nice form factor.
Being able to bring it with you on the go is probably the perfect way to experience that game, which is why Garrett and I, even though it's on PC, we strongly recommend actually playing it on Vita if you have the option, or if it ever comes to Switch. Who knows? One of these days,
who knows?
Maybe it comes to Switch one day. So now that we've got Persona 4 Golden out of the way, Garrett, what is your first choice for this list? We've already got one. So what do you think?
So I really thought about this because I did play various RPGs on my Vita. I feel like when I was going through my list, there was a lot of non-RPGs I played on Vita versus RPGs focused. So I try to create the best list I can, and a list that you wouldn't really see outside the system. Because there are a ton of Vita games now ported to PC or even on Switch that run much better. So I try to focus on the games that you would predominantly see on Vita and plays really well. The first game I want to point out, and I think a lot of people would point this out too in their top 10 list, and that's Odin Sphere Leif Thrasher.
Yep.
I think that's how you pronounce it. It's a Vanillaware game, and it's a remake of the 2007 PS2 game. And it is a action RPG where you rotate between various characters, and it's just a super fun time. You go through various levels and battle arenas. It's like a magical fantasy setting or whatever. And you go through a combo of like standard attacks, skills. It's very fast paced. I don't know how to compare it to, but it's just a lot of numbers flying out onto the screen. You have to do a bunch of different combos on enemies. It's very artistic. If anyone knows Vanillaware, they have that certain art style with it. Maybe similar to Child Light, like something like that. I was gonna say
they've got like a very beautiful hand-drawn look to all their games, and regardless of which Vanillaware game you play, because believe it or not, spoiler alert for this list, we're going to be talking about Vanillaware a lot today.
Yes.
But I mean, their games are gorgeous regardless of what system they're on. Even like a game like Muramasa, the Demon Blade on the Wii.
Right.
Even though the Wii wasn't known for beautiful games, like that game looks incredible.
Looks really good.
Even today. So yeah, I think that they have a beautiful style to their games. And I mean, you couldn't have started it better off with Odin Sphere, because I think the remake is incredible. I know that the original game had some like weird pacing problems, and it wasn't really perfect. Like it was one of the last PS2 games too, if you can believe it. It was like it came out in 2007, so well after the PS3 was out. So I'm really happy to see this on this list. It is also on PlayStation 4, but I would say like it runs perfectly fine on Vita. So I think it
runs really good on Vita.
The best place to play it. So Odin Sphere, great pick, Garrett. Rather than going to another Vanillaware game, because we'll be talking about Vanillaware in a bit, I'm going to steal one that's probably on Garrett's list. And I'm sorry in advance, Garrett, for stealing this, but I'm a huge Tales fan, and a huge fan of the Tales of series. And I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the one mainline Tales game we got here in North America on the Vita, because there were actually multiple Tales games that came to Vita. We talked about this back on the Tales episode, but they were only in Japan. But this one actually made it out here. That's Tales of Hearts R, of course.
Yes.
On the Vita. A really fantastic, another great action RPG, just like Odin Sphere, but it's a 3D action game, very similar to the other Tales games for the most part, and it really just took the core Tales experience that I was really used to on all the home consoles and then ported it beautifully to Vita. So it's got some great cinematics. It's got some cool characters. The story is fantastic. And Tales of Hearts are, even though I don't think it's one of the best Tales games, I do think that it's a great portable Tales games. And it's definitely the best portable Tales game, at least of the ones I've played. I still haven't played the other two remakes that came to Vita, but I mean, I've played Tales of Innocence on, the DS, the fan translation of that, and some other ones, or even like the 3DS version of Tales of the Abyss, which I don't think is as strong as the PS2 version. So yeah, I would have to say Tales of Hearts has to make this list. It's awesome. And again, if you're a Tales fan, you got to check it out.
Sounds good. I am actually playing it on my OLED Vita right over here. Yes, I have two Vitas. Don't
You're too fancy, Garrett.
Too fancy. I love my OLED Vita so much. It looks really good. I've been playing it for like the past 2 weeks on the bus, actually, and just going through the story. And I agree with you. It has that very Tales core style, but in a portable format, and it plays super well. The story is serviceable. I love the action in it. So yeah, that's a very good pick.
Nice.
All righty.
So what's your next pick?
My next pick. It's probably not on a lot of people's list, to be honest with you. But I'm going to throw it out there. And that's Freedom Wars.
That's a good one.
That came out. Yeah, it's a good one. It came out early in the PlayStation Vita cycle. It came out 2014. Made by Japan Studio. I don't know. They had some other collaborations maybe with it, if I can recall. But
yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head.
Mainly focused Japan Studio. And this is when Sony Japan really pushed forward with the Vita, actually had support with the Vita. And I'm glad they brought this one out because it's basically a Monster Hunter hunting clone of some kind. It has a really good, cool style to it. It's very futuristic. It's based on you as just like kind of like a prisoner in the apocalypse, and you're trying to buy time by going out to these certain like missions to defeat enemies, and you buy more time on top of your character, so on and so forth. It is very multiplayer party focused, where you go out in like with your other AI or online to these like kind of big robot excursions, and you basically try to cut limb by limb these big, I don't know what I think they're called like abductors or something like that. I like the combat of it very much on Vita because it's very different than what you see in any other action RPG. It kind of does more acrobatics, hook shot into certain parts of a monster, and you kind of just slash in between joints and appendages, and you try to get those parts to come and bring back to the hub, and you upgrade your weapons and so on and so forth. So I really enjoyed of what I played with this game. I didn't beat it. I don't think Freedom Wars is a game to like really, really beat. I'm sure you could beat the story just fine. It doesn't really have like an
end. Like there is, but like it just keeps going for the most part because again, you're basically trying to reduce your prison sentence over time. Yeah. But like there's no end to the prison sentence. That's kind of the point of the game. So
yeah, pretty much.
There is one thing I will say about that game though, and that it is definitely much harder if you don't have other players, which of course there's just naturally less people playing it now than there was when it came out online.
True. Yes.
So if you don't know other people that have the game, I think it's a little bit harder to get into than some other games. But I do think it's a great pick then. And for sure, I knew you'd probably be picking it, Garrett, which is why I didn't throw it on my personal list.
Right.
But it's definitely a game that I think really deserves to be here. And that's the only thing I would say to anyone who's new and hasn't had a chance to play it yet. It's definitely a little bit harder to get into again if you don't without the social aspect or without friends to play with. But to your point, Garrett, I still think it's pretty fun regardless. Yeah. So check it out.
And I think you get it. You can. It was on PlayStation Plus.
Yeah.
Once upon a time. So you guys may have it. If
you might already have
PlayStation Plus forever. You might have just grabbed that game. So just check it out. It doesn't need to be like you get into it for like hours on end and you need to beat the game. But it's something to just look at in the PlayStation Vita like repertoire. It's not in any other system either. It's only on PlayStation Vita. So.
And one of the nice things about this game is it's one of the Vita physical games that hasn't like spiraled out of control as far as prices yet. So this is one that if you want a physical copy of, it's definitely one of the cheaper ones to get. So because I remember they were bundling it with some crazy promotions, and they did produce a ton of copies with it, but it just didn't sell super well. So copies have just been sitting out there for a while, and that's why I think the price has been a lot cheaper. Versus again, like Tales of Hearts R that I just talked about, like that one's like $100 to $200 range if you want a physical copy of it. So it's like stupidly expensive because all the Tales games are ridiculously priced now, regardless of the
Everyone's collecting them.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, next up on my list, I've actually got a remake of a game that is on the Vita. And I talked about this one actually a tiny bit back on our 10th episode, which was the Mana episode. But my pick is Adventures of Mana. So this is actually a remake of the very first Mana game, Seiken, which actually in North America was Final Fantasy Adventure on the Game Boy, the original Game Boy. But they actually did a full remake of the game for PlayStation Vita and PS3 with like an updated art style and some fully orchestrated music. But this game is actually a really fun game to play today. It's basically a top-down action RPG, very similar to something like The Legend of Zelda. So, I mean, you're going, like, even just the way you navigate between rooms or different areas, like, you go to the edge of the screen and then it kind of scrolls over to, like, the next area. Like, it very much plays like a Zelda game because, again, this... as we talked about back on the Mana episode, this was meant to be kind of Square's answer to The Legend of Zelda. So if you like games like The Legend of Zelda, I think you're going to have a really good time with this one. But again, it has all of the stuff that you love from the other Mana games, such as a lot of the enemies like the Rabbites or the mushrooms, or a lot of the different bosses that appear in later Mana games. If you've never played the original, like, are all found here. You even have the option to switch to the OG soundtrack. So if you want to play a Vita remake with Game Boy music in it, I mean, you could definitely play with that music as well, which I think is a really neat addition as well. And it's definitely a lot easier to go back to this version of the game versus going back and playing the Game Boy original, simply because, again, there's some translation errors in that one, and there's some wonkiness to the way that game plays that they kind of ironed out with this version of the game. So
cool.
I know it's a game that a lot of people missed. There was no physical edition of this as far as I'm aware of. I think this was digital only for Vita. But I still think it's a game worth picking up, and it's cheap too. It's like $10. So I definitely recommend it.
On PlayStation Network is $10?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's really nice.
Yeah, it launched at a pretty cheap price when it first came out. So it's a game that I think is worth checking out if you've liked the Mana games before, if you've never played them but you like games like Legend of Zelda. I definitely think it's worth a pickup for sure.
Cool. Nice. Well, okay, so for my next item on the list, I think this game, I wouldn't say this is a full-blown RPG, but it is a franchise that is built off of probably one of the most famous RPG franchises, and that is Dragon Quest Builders.
Nice.
I think this game runs fantastic on Vita. It's also on PS4, and I think also on Switch. But this is a kind of a Minecraft clone, but mix it with a lot of RPG mechanics together, and there you go. You're this kind of character that's called like the Builder or whatever, and you go to various areas to like build up and these towns and then defend from enemies and so on and so forth. I think this is a fantastic game on the Vita. I love the way you kind of build from a blueprint instead of like make your own creative like a thing. It's like it's a quest line. It's like, all right, you're gonna build this room, you're gonna build this floor, you're gonna upgrade this weapon, so on and so forth. Okay, here's the wave. And it's like action RPG type of mechanics where you go out and you just like attack various monsters. It's a great story behind it as well. And the sequel, Dragon Quest Builders 2, is amazing as well. But sad that it's not on Vita.
Nope.
But yeah, this game needed to be on the list. I know it's probably not the definition of RPG, but it is a game that is very heavily influenced by RPG mechanics.
Yeah, honestly, that's a game that I wasn't really thinking about when I was putting this together. Mainly because, again, I didn't really play it on Vita. Like, I played it on Xbox, of all places.
Oh, wow.
To play it on, because it did eventually come to Game Pass. So that's actually where I got a chance to play it. And I liked it, but I wasn't like, a mega fan of it, but I know, for example, there's a lot of people that are big fans of this game. Sean Capri in particular, shout out to him, who's a huge fan of Dragon Quest Builders. So I do think it was actually a really cool concept for a Dragon Quest game, and it was so different from anything else you'd see in the series. And yeah, I think that's actually a great pick for this list, Garrett. That's one that was like totally outside the box that I just didn't even think about. So
yeah, and it plays very well on Vita. So go out, grab it on PlayStation Network. I don't know if it has a physical copy. I doubt it, actually.
Yeah, I can't remember. It might have had one at some point, but I can't remember.
Okay.
But either
it
way,
might be super
PlayStation
expensive
Network,
now.
PlayStation Network is probably the best place to pick up a lot of these games, and that one's probably one of them, that's for sure. Well, speaking of physical copies, that it might actually be serviceable to maybe get this one in person. We have to return to Vanillaware, Garrett, because I teased it before.
Of course we do.
It would be impossible for us not to talk about more Vanillaware games, and I'm going to have to pick one of my favorite Vanillaware games, and that's Dragon's Crown, which is an action RPG beat-em-up game in the style of the Dungeons and Dragons arcade games, like Shadows of Astara, as an example, where they're essentially brawlers with RPG elements sort of tied to them. There's this overarching story where essentially you're searching for the Dragon's Crown in order to kind of save this kingdom, but then there's some political turmoil that happens. But you're not really playing this game for the story. The story is okay. It's not like, I think it's definitely the weakest of all Vanillaware stories in particular. Like Odin Sphere just had such a strong narrative where Dragon's Crown, I played it hours and hours on end, not caring about the story at all because I was trying to level up my Amazon as quickly as possible because I just loved the combat in Dragon's Crown just so much, especially if you've got, 4 friends together or if you just play online with randoms sometimes, you can have a great time. I love kind of the risk reward system that was in this game as well, where once you get to a certain point in the game, it'll basically have you picking levels at random. And then as you continue to play through levels, because you basically don't get your lives replenished, you can choose to keep going, and then you get more and more rewards. Like the rewards multiply as you go through it, and kind of stick with things. But there's also some risk there too, because if you run out of lives, you literally lose everything that you kind of went for when you started your journey. So you kind of have to think about, okay, where's the stopping point for this? Like how many levels can we get through without, losing all of our lives? And I love that whole aspect of the combat and the gameplay. So Dragon's Crown, absolutely fantastic game. All the character classes are really interesting and unique from each other too, as well. Even though I know there's some, troublesome stuff with the art style that I know there was some controversy about. But you know what? When I play it, I look back on it with fond memories, especially too, because I kind of look at it like the art in that game kind of reminds me of like old like D&D books from the 80s, like how it's everything's exaggerated, both the men and the women characters are. So I just love that game to pieces. The only thing I will say is that the Vita version does suffer from some frame rate dips, especially when the combat gets kind of heavy. But other than that, I love Dragon's Crown on Vita, and it was also at one point a PlayStation Plus game. So you might already have it if you've never played it before, but you've been redeeming PlayStation Plus for a long time. But Garrett, what about you? What do you think about Dragon's Crown?
I really like Dragon's Crown. That was probably another game that was in my backup list of Vanillaware games. Vanillaware does a fantastic job of supporting the Vita system in general. But yeah, Dragon's Crown was a very good game on Vita. And as you said, it's just that feedback loop of going into a dungeon, see how far you can go with your characters, and then coming back and then just like increasing their skill level or their weapons and whatnot. And that risk reward system was very addictive. I think Vanillaware did a very good job of making addictive gameplay on that handheld with both Odin Sphere and Dragon's Crown. So yeah, I agree with you. It is a very good addition to the list.
And it's another, cross-gen title as well. It's also on PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4. They eventually did a PlayStation 4 port, which plays in 4K. I don't know if you've actually played that version of the game, Garrett, but it's gorgeous. It looks incredible in 4K. So
I do have it on PlayStation 4, and you can do cross saves with your Vita, and it's very nice to do that.
I was gonna say I still have my save with almost 100 hours of gameplay on it. That just travels with me because I almost fully leveled all of the character classes. But I just the game's really good. But what about you, Garrett? What's your next choice? You've only got 2 more left.
I got 2 more or 1 more.
Okay. I think we're about 7 in.
Oh, okay, sounds good. My next one, and also this kind of stems between RPG or not, but I think this is an RPG. And this the next game I'm gonna put out is Severed. This game is by Drinkbox Studios. It is a dungeon crawling RPG. It's very simple, and I really enjoy the gameplay of it. Basically, this game is about this woman or this daughter that lost her family, and she's just trying to figure out who kind of slain her family throughout this kind of, I don't know, this fantasy world, kind of like the Upside Down world in a sense.
Well, it's like almost like the realm of the dead. That's kind of what it reminded me of. Like
yeah, definitely. And you go dungeon to dungeon and you face various monsters. And I think the gameplay of this was very unique at the time for the Vita because it was all touchscreen.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah. You have to play with it with the touchscreen. You can't play this one on the Vita TV, Garrett.
No, you cannot at all, unfortunately. I think eventually they had some dual stick control support on other systems, but for Vita, it was definitely all touchscreen where you have various monsters that have guards, have various limbs and parts all around, and you're supposed to slash them as best you can. You got to predict the enemy's moves based off of like, are they protecting themselves or are they about to attack you? Sometimes there's like 4 or 5 monsters in a dungeon room where you have to balance out for each and every one of them. And once you get all those monsters, like destroy all those monsters, you get those parts, and those parts you upgrade your armor and your weapons. But it's a very straightforward, simple like game, and I love the story of it. I think it's a very strong narrative. It is a shorter game too. I think I beat it maybe 8 or 9 hours or something like that. And I did get the platinum for this one. It's a very achievable platinum. But yeah, I think Drinkbox Studios is one of those studios that supported the Vita system very well, and Severed was a pretty good game on that system.
Absolutely. Especially like, it's a testament to how much I love the game because I hate first-person RPGs, but this is one that just really spoke to me between the art style and the combat and everything else. Like, I really loved that game, and it's got like this really interesting narrative to it that with some things that I was not expecting while playing it. So this is a game I also really enjoyed as well. And this is a fantastic pick, I think, for this list. And I can't wait to see what they do next, because I know that we've got that new game from Drinkbox next year, Nobody Saves the World, which is another RPG from them, which is going to be interesting, I think, because I know they're more known for, Guacamelee with Metroidvanias. So I'm really interested to see what they're going to do with their next game for sure. But all of their games have been amazing. So, and of course, Canada represent, Garrett. They're from Toronto. So,
they are from Toronto. Wow.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, homegrown studio here. As for me, we return to the world of JRPGs, Garrett, and going back to a series that I never really got into until this game on the Vita came out, and that's Ys Memories of Celceta. So the Ys series goes back a long way, all the way back to the TurboGrafx 16, and it was a game series that I really had missed out on for a number of years and never really went into it. And there's a number of great Ys games on the PlayStation Vita, which we'll probably actually talk about maybe in honorable mentions unless you have one on your list, Garrett. But Ys Memory of Celceta is kind of like a side story that happens around the time of Ys 4, where you basically play as the same character, which is interesting because like all of the Ys games, in a way, I don't think they're super connected to each other than the main character is just the same main character in all the Ys games for some reason. But for this one is another action RPG. I feel like I've been saying that a lot, but I think a lot of Vita's best RPGs are action RPGs and not turn-based ones. So
I agree with you.
We just didn't see as many of them here in North America because there are a lot of Vita RPGs that are Japan only, and I think that's where a lot of the turn-based ones stayed. But Ys was an incredible action RPG. I will say the story is okay. I was definitely lost a bit because I hadn't played a lot of the other previous games in the series. So I didn't really know kind of the some of the dynamics between the characters or even some of the nods to the previous Ys games. But I really liked the combat in that game. Like, it was a really fun game to really explore dungeons with, or I just like the exploration in that game. Like, I had a ton of fun with Ys Memories of Celceta, which also eventually did get a PlayStation 4 and port as well.
Yes.
I think it's on Switch now too, if I'm not mistaken. So there are good ways to play it now if you don't have a Vita, but I don't know. I feel it fits pretty well at home on the PlayStation Vita, and I think it's a great place to play it. So I definitely wanted to add that to the list because it really turned me on to a series that I just never was into before. Like now I've been going back and then trying to play more of the Ys games. And plus we've been getting some newer Ys releases as well with Ys 8 and Ys 9 as well. So yeah. It's cool to finally have an Ys game on this list. Garrett, what do you think about the Ys games? I don't think we've ever talked about them.
I wish I played more of them. That's the thing. I think Ys is one of those series that is like kind of quietly coming into the RPG space a lot more and becoming a lot more popular, especially with Ys 8 and 9 coming out. And it looks really, really good. I wish I've played Memories of Celceta earlier. I wish I knew what that game was on Vita because it looks really fun. I did play a good chunk of Ys Origin on Vita, and that one's pretty good as well. So that's the remake of, or it's just like an HD port of the game that came out on PC earlier.
That was actually one of the games on my honorable mention list as well, because I actually played that one on Xbox, but I know it's the Vita version's really good too. So
it's a very solid one on Vita as well. So it's very nice to see a Ys game on this list. I know there's probably I think Ys. Is it 8 on Vita as well? I think it's on Vita, but I did not play it on there. It is. I did play it a little bit on Switch. So awesome. That's very cool to see.
All right. Garrett, last game.
My last game. And I think, well, I've already mentioned this before in a previous podcast, but I'll just throw it out there because I think it deserves to be on this list, and that is Child of Light.
We literally talked about it last episode.
We literally talked about it last episode.
Because we did talk about the Vita version on the last episode as well.
I think this game runs really well on Vita. I think this is the way to play Child of Light versus other systems, just because of the portable factor, and you could just take it on the go, and you could kind of just like focus in on that handheld screen for this game. But yeah, I won't say too much more other than it's great on the system. It's a shorter RPG as well. As you can tell, I'm putting out games that it would probably be easy for someone to dive into the Vita handheld system and get out. So yeah, I'm sorry I put it out there. I know I mentioned it the previous episode.
No, it's to be expected. We all knew it was coming, but at the same time, I think it wouldn't be a complete list of the best Vita RPGs if we didn't at least mention it, because I actually agree with you. It's a game that should be on that list. And it's also interesting too, because most of the games we've been talking about have been Japanese games. So it was cool to have refreshing to have that and Severed kind of be our two Western RPGs on this list, because we didn't get too many of them on the Vita at all.
We really did not. Yeah.
But the ones that we did get were awesome. So yeah, I'm glad that you actually had that on the list as well. I think that's a great way to kind of end the list, because again, this is me assuming that we're putting Persona 4 Golden on this list, which is why it feels like it's kind of out of order, but it kind of makes sense. So I think we should go to some honorable mentions, Garrett. Ones that we didn't talk about. So beyond your list, because I had Ys Origins on mine. One of the other ones I had was another Vanillaware game, which is Muramasa Rebirth, which is
that one's very good as well.
It's a port of the Wii version of Muramasa the Demon Blade with some great new features, and that's one of the games that I particularly remember playing when I had the OLED Vita and being blown away by how beautiful that game was on the OLED Vita, with the way the colors were in that game. Like, that was an incredible game. And then I cheated a little bit with my last entry, because we talked some of the other games I had as honorable mentions you had talked about on your side, Garrett. But one that I cheated with was all the PlayStation 1 and PSP RPGs are also on the Vita, because one of the things that people always forget about the Vita is that it plays all of the digital PS1 games and all of the PSP games that are digital. And there's a ton of RPGs that we could spend another episode talking about, just PSP RPGs in particular, because that's an amazing console for RPGs. And there's a ton of good ones digitally available on Vita. So, and they're all fairly cheap. Most of them are not more than $20 digitally. So
get them while they're open, because the PlayStation Network for Vita is it's gonna probably close
we're gonna talk
within
about
the
that
next year.
After we're done our honorable mentions, because I feel like that's a subject we need to broach here. So that kind of does it for my honorable mentions. Because again, I had like Odin Sphere on my list as well, Ys Origin, some other stuff we talked about. So Garrett, what about you? What'd you have for honorable mentions?
Definitely some overlap from your list as well, but two series that is not on this list. I just wish I played more of them on the Vita. And that, as you said, the Atelier games. I started my Atelier journey with Atelier Ryza on Switch. So I've only played Atelier games really on Switch. So I wish I went back and played a little bit more. I just haven't gotten any Atelier games on my Vita system, but I do want to mention them because they are a good set of those games are very fantastic on the Vita itself. So Atelier franchise, go out and see which games are really good and just pick them out on the PlayStation Network. Another franchise that is on the Vita system, but it's kind of everywhere else, and I do have it. It's the Trails of Cold Steel games.
Yeah.
I know we didn't mention it. I know it's like everyone else's like favorite game. Like I feel like someone who's a fan of Trails of Cold Steel absolutely loves it. And so I just wanted to mention that I did play like maybe 10 or 15 hours on the Steam version, and it's very good. Yeah. I love the combat of that game itself. I think the downfall of playing it on the Vita system is that it is at normal speed all the time. That means it's pretty slow to go through on the Vita versus on the Steam version or the Switch version where you can like do double or triple fast forward and you actually save like maybe, not kidding, like 30 or 40 hours playing it on a Switch or Steam version versus Vita. So I would just be hesitant to play it on Vita now and just play it on just a newer system in general.
Well, so the problem you run into with those games. So first of all, I haven't actually played them either, which is the reason why I didn't put them on my list. Again, because I've heard nothing but good things about them, but I've heard it's a ton of time you've got to dedicate to them, and you basically have to play all 4 of them in a row. Kind of. Plus, they build off some older games like on the PSP, which again I hadn't had time to play them. But the weird thing about the Trails of Cold Steel games in particular is that the first 2 are on Vita, but not the last 2, and then the last 2 are on Switch, but not the first 2. So the only place you can really play all 4 of them in one place, like all 4 Trails of Cold Steel games, is PS4 essentially. Like that's the only console and Steam. Those are the only 2 really places you can play them all in one place. So you kind of have to like it's probably easier to maybe justify them more as PS4 and PC games versus Vita games. To the point where you're not getting the whole saga there in one place, I guess.
Yeah, the first 2 are very well connected. If I remember correctly, the third one, you really don't need that save file or whatever from the previous game to go into. So, but yeah, I see a lot of people saying this is where I play Trails of Cold Steel, and this is by far like one of my favorite RPG franchises. So I just wanted to mention out there that this game is out. So
yeah,
there you go.
Well, speaking of that, we had actually asked for the community suggestions as to what their favorite PlayStation Vita games were, and we only actually got one response. This is from Matt Sowinski, my PlayStation Drive co-host at Burnout Matt on Twitter, and he said Persona 3/Persona 4 Golden, because you have Persona 3 Portable on there from the PSP. Also, Trails in the Sky, and then Trails of Cold Steel 1 and 2. The Danganronpa games, which are not RPGs, but I think he just wanted to throw them in there because they're fantastic PlayStation and Vita games. So many classics is how he kind of ends off. So Matt, I know in particular, him and I have had conversations about the Trails of games, and he's a big fan of the Trails games in particular. So
yes.
I would be remiss if we didn't at least mention them here. But yeah, we should talk about, because you had kind of alluded to this, and I kind of wanted to use this to kind of round out the end of our conversation, is the PlayStation Store. Obviously, we would imagine it's probably going to be closing soon. By the time you're listening to this, you'll no longer be able to buy games on the store naturally
Right.
by basically adding funds to your wallet. You're basically going to have to add funds to your wallet either via gift cards through the PlayStation Vita itself, or you have to basically go on PlayStation 4 or PlayStation 5 and add funds to your wallet that way, or you can go in the web store and do that as well. But they're basically making it harder and harder to buy games on Vita to the point where, and again, I'm curious to know what your take on this is on Garrett, but like I feel like the PlayStation Vita store is probably be getting closed by like this time next year. It'll be done.
That's probably a good guess. That is a very good guess. In a year from now, they were initially announcing it to be closed, I think in August, right? Earlier this year, they mentioned it will be closed at the end of the summer or whatever. Yeah. And that freaked people out. I think it freaked the PlayStation Vita developers more out. It's like, no, we're developing the port for Vita, and now you're telling us you're closing the store in like 6 months. That's not cool.
Well, they didn't give 6 months notice. It was very like it was less notice than that. Like it was a very quick turnaround. Like the PSP store was pretty much gone like the next week.
Yeah. So it's upsetting. I understand Sony wanting to drop this store. It is a very niche environment now. The PlayStation Vita is kind of a past system now. It's just a relic of its time. So yeah, I understand Sony wanting to drop this. I just wish they gave us like a little bit more heads up. It's like, hey, we're gonna close. Like if they would have told us, we're going to close the natural way of paying the games 6 months from now or 8 months from now. And then a year or a year and a half, we're going to close the store. So that would probably be a better transition for developers and customers to go through. Not this wish-washy of like, oh, we're closing the PlayStation Portable store now and we're going to close a Vita store in like 2 months.
Yeah.
It was kind of just like the wrong move from Sony's standpoint. But I don't think they care too much because they just want to close the Vita store down as much as they can. I think I want to bring in another reason why they want to close this down is the piracy that is involved with the PlayStation Vita. And this happened with the PlayStation Portable as well, where it's pretty easy to do this to the point of the latest version of the PlayStation Vita software, you can go online, search it up, and you can crack it probably within 30 minutes. And there you go. You can get any game you want if you want to. So I think they just want to like, hey, we're kind of just done with this, and we don't want this to be an opening for our hackers or pirators to get into any of our other connected systems with PS4 and PS5. So I think that's why they just want to drop this ball as soon as they can.
Well, yeah, between this and the PlayStation 3 stores in particular, like how vulnerable they are to hackers, I would imagine that that's the main reason behind this, combined with, keeping those, the cash stores, like to being able to accept payments and stuff like that. Like they have to outsource a lot of that stuff, and the amount of money that goes into that is pretty high. Just to keep the storefronts open. So I think that's part of the reason why they want to do that. And that's why, like, I think this first move of, disabling payments on the console itself is kind of the stepping stone toward that. So definitely, folks, I would say that get your Vita games while you can, especially because, again, the physical collections are very expensive and they're only going to go up when the store closes. So I would say get the games that you want now before you close things off. Also, I did a video about this on my YouTube page where I talk about not just RPGs, but the 10 Vita games that I suggest you actually pick up before the store closes, especially because I wanted to highlight some of the ones that are like super expensive or the ones that are definitely worth getting that maybe didn't get a physical release. So if you go to youtube.com/Ryan Turford, I've got guides for the Vita, but also PSP stuff, PS1 and PS2 classics, and the PS3. I've got you covered on all those consoles, so you can check out my picks there. But definitely grab them while you still can. That's one of the reasons why I actually invested pretty recently in a 64 gig card for my Vita for that reason, because I would be downloading so much more stuff now that I'm trying to get all the stuff that I want from the store before it closes. Right. And also, I think like for this show, I think it'll be important to do maybe a list like this for the PSP and the PS3 before those stores close. So I think we're going to probably do those in the next 6 months or so. We'll be giving our suggestions for those consoles there as well. But enough about that, good. Garrett. We should probably round out the show and kind of close things up. But before we go, Garrett, plugs go.
You can follow me at Twitter at Blind Explosion, and you can follow me over at the PlayStation Vita Games Podcast Network, where I'm a co-host to the Nintendo Shack. We are live on Thursday evenings at twitch.tv/PSVG, and you can support us over at patreon.com/PSVG.
Very nice, my friend. As for me, you can find me on Twitter at Ryan Turford. You also find us on Twitter at Yumi Capri's on podcast services around the globe, as well as youtube.com/Yumi Capri. So for Garrett Bland, I'm Ryan Turford. This has been level 22 of the RPG Cave, and we're out.
Bye-bye.
The RPG Cave's mana is fueled by patrons over at patreon.com/Yumi Capri. And I want to say thanks to each and every one of our Patreon supporters for all of your support throughout the years, as well as supporting our independent content. And let's start with by thanking our premium producers, Dallas Ford, Lee Navarro, the fearless leader of the Phoenix Overdrive Extra Life team, and Jonathan Brown. You can find his content over at youtube.com/PM Entertainment. Our platinum producers, Robbie Bobby Mailer and Trucker Sloth, and our gold members, Argo, Brendan Myers, Dallas Robbins, Emily O'Kelly, Heather Boney, James Johnson, Joel Brooks, Jose Jimenez, Mac Time, Benji Kong, Marcus O'Neill, RJ Kern, Dano, Skinny Matt, Mr. and Mrs. Nasty Boots, Foolish Fuji, and Xavier Reyes. Thank you all for all of your support.